I lived in a women's only dorm, and my friends and I created a Sunday night catch-up. It started informally, but then it became something that none of us wanted to miss. We'd order a couple of infamous Domino's pizzas. I don't know why we ate those. We'd gather in one of our rooms, whichever one was the cleanest. And it was an opportunity to share what had happened over our weekend. Since we were in college and we were emerging into adulthood, some of the biggest news was who got together with who, what fraternities had the biggest parties, and who broke up with whoever. But there were also other things that we discussed. There were relationships challenges. There were struggles with our families at home, or there was a huge assignment due that week. These catch-ups were often filled with squeals of laughter, moments of joys, and sometimes tears. There were some informal rules to our catch-up, not stated but generally understood. What happened in the room stayed in the room. If someone was having a really hard time, we would make a point of catching up and checking in on them during the week. And most importantly, if somebody said they had a crush on somebody, you did not go after that person. We saw each other through breakups, regrettable actions, mostly fueled by alcohol, and our overall messy attempts to be adults. At the time, we thought it was just a time to catch up and know all of the gossip on the floor, like we were in the know. But I look back on it now and see it for what it was, which is a covenantal relationship. I'm so grateful to talk to you today about covenant. It's something that I talk about often. It often comes up in things like board meetings or committee meetings. In a denomination where we don't have a creed or a specific set of beliefs, it is covenant, I believe, that creates our sacred bond. As you heard in the reading, to covenant means to come together. I've reflected a lot on Rebecca Parker's words and what she writes about covenant. As adults, we make lots of different kinds of covenants. If we get married, we promise a covenant to love or respect, perhaps to be faithful, perhaps to love through sickness and health. If we have children, we promise or covenant to care for the child, to keep it safe, to instill values, and to surround the child with community. When our parents age, many of us have covenants with them as well, that we will take care of them as they took care of us. We make covenants with other members of our family to stay in relationship, even when the other family member is a member of a different political party. Especially when a family member is a member of a different political party. And we make covenants with our friends to check on them, to stand with them, to laugh and to cry with them. These promises are our covenants with each other. Sometimes they're hard. Sometimes they're really, really hard. And many times we don't keep them. But we want to. We yearn to be our best selves. Unitarian Universalism is a covenantal religion. That means everything about us comes back to our covenant with each other. For some people, that's a big surprise when they become Unitarian Universalists. They're waiting for a bishop or a diocese somewhere to tell them what to do and how they're supposed to believe and how they should interact. We don't have that. For people who have grown up Unitarian Universalists or who have been here a long time, they're shocked when they hear other denominations that have that kind of structure, and it's not just about us being in covenant with each other. But it is hard, and we need to be reminded about it over and over again. Our covenant to do faith together has been here long before we got here, and it will be here long after we're gone. The idea of a covenantal religion was actually one of the cornerstones of the colonizing people of America. When the Puritans were defining the early church in New England, they wanted it to specifically be different than the authoritative Church of England that they had come from. The Cambridge Platform of 1648, it's a critical document in our history, defines the principles of a covenant church. It says that we come together not only by word of mouth, but by sacrifice, and also sometimes by silent consent, without any writing or expression of words at all. As a reaction to an oppressive religious environment, our forebears embraced a free religion. They advocated for free speech, dissent, open debate, tolerance of different opinions, and a disciplined search for truth. It's not enough to say that we're in covenant together. We actually have to practice it. It's the same in our lives as it is with our congregation. My wife and I just celebrated one of our wedding anniversaries. We have two. It's a long story. Yes! There are some people who had to get married when we could and we knew it was safe, is what I'm going to say. But at our wedding, both of them actually, I said some lovely words to her in our wedding vows, our covenant. And she said some lovely words back to me. But it turns out that we can't just say those words and be done with it. We need to be practicing every single day how to live out those words. We all make covenants, and then we break them. We screw up. We say something without thinking. We get tired of the work that it takes to be in covenant, and sometimes we have a bad day and cut somebody else's clotheslines. Sometimes we're just tired and cranky. We break our covenant, and we must practice getting back into it. I'm not saying it's easy. I'm saying that we need to do it anyway because ours is a covenantal faith. So I want to thank David for the hymn this morning, Come, Come, Wherever You Are, for playing with the words with me on that. It's actually from a poem from the 14th century poet Rumi, Sufi poet. Anyone know Rumi? Love Rumi. The poem goes like this. Come, come, whoever you are, wanderer, worshiper, lover of leaving, it doesn't matter. Ours is not a caravan of despair. Come, even if you have broken your vows 1,000 times. Come yet again. Come, come. So the version that we sang is my favorite version of it because it has those two parts of it. The come, come, whoever you are, that's wonderful, welcoming, wonderful, isn't that happy, we're lovely, come anyone. But that, and what's the word for it? The Bourdon. I called it the droning bass line. He calls it Bourdon. But that one says, though we've broken our vows 1,000 times, though we've broken our vows 1,000 times, still come, come, whoever you are. That adds more complexity to the hymn, don't you think? It adds another layer of it. And I don't think it makes as much sense without having that, because then what's this lover of leaving? Where does that make sense? How does that hymn make sense with it? But we do break our vows over and over again, and we come yet again come. So what does breaking our vows in a congregation look like? We often think of the really big breaches, but it's usually the small cuts that hurt. Sometimes it's saying something abruptly or unkindly. It may be not completing what we said we would do. It may be getting upset with somebody and instead of talking to them, talking to somebody else badly about that. We are human. This happens. The key and the challenge of us being Unitarian Universalists is to try to find a way to make it right again, finding our way in love and compassion. We have broken our vows 1,000 times, and yet we come, yet again come. For me, this covenantal faith is even more relevant for our times than it was for the Puritans because it is an antidote to our individualistic culture. As Americans, we are already more individualistic than most cultures. We glorified the Lone Ranger heading out into the wild, wild west all by themselves and overcoming adversity. We have this mythology that each one of us is an island in charge of our own destiny, although we know that that's not the truth for any single one of us. But our postmodern, post-industrial, capitalistic system just accentuates this mythology. We're out to make the most money, rise to the highest position that we can, take care of number one, you know, all the slogans that mean we want to win no matter what the costs. But often the cost is high. On those we have to step on to get to that position, on those who are marginalized in the scramble, and especially to our environment in this winner-takes-all land grab. In living our covenantal relationship, we're saying that this community, our beloved community, is greater than the individual. What is better for us collectively is more important than what is better for any of us individually. That is some major counterculture stuff right there. But then, this is the main reason why I'm so passionate about covenants, because our way of being in relationship is not just good for us, but it is a means to social change. Our Puritan forebears knew this. Their emphasis on covenants challenged the status quo. By saying that they were going to work cooperatively and democratically, they challenged economic systems that neglected the poor, justice systems that were unfair, prison systems that were cruel, and economic practices that concentrated wealth in the hands of a few. There are a lot of ways that we can change the world. We can march, we can pass resolutions, we can write letters to those in power. Those are all important. But I think that the biggest way we impact change is to be the change we wish to see in the world, as Mahatma Gandhi said. As much as I want, I cannot individually change the world. Our country, certainly. I think Georgia still has a bit of work to do as well. I mean, heck, I can't even change my own town. But I can change my own church community. And I have. I've made an impact. And I know that you have changed yours. So this is our radical idea, that by living in covenant with each other, we are modeling the world we want to be in. We are envisioning what we want our whole world to be by practicing it right here in our own community. Our Puritan forebears had it right. Instead of putting the power in the hands of a small elite that's uninterested in the welfare of all, without our consent or accountability, they created a collective agreement, one that included the free conscience of every individual in mutual commitment to the common good. So it sounds good so far, right? So here's the rub. Practicing our covenant with each other, we have to make sure that it is a covenant that is holding up our highest values and morals. A covenant doesn't work just if we've had it around for a long time, but that it holds white supremacy when we're trying to break it down. That is not a moral covenant we want to live by. a covenant that advantages those of us who are able-bodied or older or younger, or those of us who have more UU experience or are wealthier or are more well-read, is not a covenant that we want to model in the world. So then it gets really hard, right? Because we need to talk about the covenant itself if we need to change it. We have to listen to those voices who feel like the covenant doesn't work for them. We need to sometimes break that covenant and find a new one that feels fair and equitable and holds us to our higher standards. And sometimes that means listening to how it's not working anymore and the inflicted harm that it's had on those we seek to be in community with. Ouch, that hurts. This is one of the many reasons that I appreciate an organization within the larger Unitarian Universalist community called Black Lives of UU. How many of you know that? Fabulous. They exist to provide support to Black UUs and to challenge the systemic issues that have made Unitarian Universalism an unwelcoming place for them. They have actively said, we have covenants that have hurt us, and yet we still want to be in community and find a new way. And even though we have been hurt, we want to help lead the way. And to that, I say, yes, sign me up. Let me follow. Let me bring you water. What can I do to help with that? Let me apologize. Let me find a new covenant. This is not just an exercise in governance, my lovely people. It is a way we wish to live in the world. It is not just words, but it is a commitment to being our best selves. It is not just an internal statement. It is our statement that we are broadcasting to the whole world how we want everyone to act. That is our opportunity. That is our obligation. It's the audacious idea that the world that we want to create has already arrived, right here, right now, in our beloved congregation. We are breaking our vow 1,000 times and then coming yet again and yet again and yet again, coming back into covenant with each other. May it be so in our congregations and in our lives.